Welcome to Hustle and Flow with Heather Hubbard, episode number 87. Hi, I'm Heather Hubbard, and I was a litigator, partner, and practice group leader at an AmLaw 200 firm. I know what it takes to rise to the top. I also know all too well the toll it can take on your personal life. So how do you shine bright without burning out? How do you embrace your ambition without selling your soul? You're listening to the Hustle and Flow podcast. Welcome back. I am your host, Heather Hubbard, and thank you so much for joining me today. This is going to be a bit of a different kind of episode because I am sharing a little bit about my personal life, which, I talk about sometimes on the podcast, but generally it is well after I have processed something. But if you're on my newsletter list, you already know this. If not, you may not. But I have been getting so many messages and, words of support, but also a lot of questions. And having gone, or as I'm going through this process, there's a lot of things coming up that I think, is relatable to anyone, regardless of where they are, because we all have similar struggles, even if they look a little bit different. So hopefully this isn't just all about me, but it's something that you will be able to relate to and get some words of wisdom from as well. So I guess just jumping straight in, the long and short of it is that I have melanoma cancer, but it is very, very early. We caught it early. I'm just going to be able to do surgery. So it's all good in that sense. But I'm just going to kind of back up and kind of share what that journey looks like. And I just want to tell you, I'm really nervous doing this right now. I was really nervous even sending that email out. So hopefully that doesn't come through, but it's just, that's the honest truth. I am a very reserved person. I keep things very, very close to the vest, and I'm just not one to share, not even with close friends often. So this is way outside my comfort zone. But as I said in the email to my newsletter list, my coach was, when I shared the news with her, she said, have you told your people? And I'm like, what do you mean? And she was like, I think you should tell them now. And I'm like, well, let me get through this, process it, and then I might share it. And she's like, no, I think you need to share it now because you're always asking people to be vulnerable and to reach out for support and ask for support. And I think you need to, walk the walk, not just talk the talk. And this is a new mastermind I joined that just started the beginning of September. And the coach that I was with for the previous year, she's really the one that I had talked about in a previous episode. I believe it was episode 14 on lessons learned. That was the first time I had met that coach. And she was really encouraging me to unzip. She said, you're too zipped up. You need to unzip. And I'm like, well, this is just who I am. And it is to a degree. I mean, it is definitely my personality. It's who I am. But I think a lot of attorneys really struggle with that as well. So this is my attempt to walk the walk, not just talk the talk, and just open up and be vulnerable as I'm going through something and as I have not quite processed it. So I guess if we just kind of start at the beginning, I am super white. I am definitely one of the super white girls in that I have very, very fair skin. Growing up, I always kind of considered him a stepdad. He was actually our next door neighbor, but he called me the whitest white girl he had ever known. And I have been made fun of a lot over the color of my skin. It was probably the hardest thing for me as a kid growing up. Not only are kids cruel, adults can be too. And even to this day, when I go to the beach, people stare. That's just how pale, how white I am. And I am very, very sensitive to the sun. I know this. So I am always sitting under an umbrella. I have my 100 SPF on. I'm always reapplying. I've got big hats, my sunglasses, and, just get a lot of comments about why I don't want to get a tan. And the truth is I cannot get a tan. And oftentimes people then want to argue with me about that. And they think they can help me out. So, it's not normal. our society, our culture does not like it. That may sound weird, but they don't. People don't really like that very pale look, and they want to help you out. And, my really good friends, my law school girlfriends, and my other friends, like, they just know that I can't be in the sun. We laugh at this story. When we were first year in law school, we were on a cruise going to the Bahamas, and it was overcast. Like, the sun wasn't even out. We weren't even up there for maybe an hour. I had sunscreen on. And of course, they're all complaining because they were getting no sun, and I got a really bad burn. And that's when they knew. And now everyone's always pulling the umbrellas over for me. So it's something that I'm very aware of, something that I try to focus on is making sure that I don't get burned. And yet I still do. Even that trip to Hawaii that I was telling you about with episode 14, I got a really bad sunburn there. Again, despite being in the shade, despite being under an umbrella with a big hat on, with some sunscreen. So that's kind of been my whole life. And I know that, but that means I have to get the skin checks, although everyone should be doing it all the time. And there is a particular place on my arm that we've been looking at and kind of following for, many years, probably at least 5 or more, maybe closer to 8. And so, they just measure it every year, take pictures. And I had to change doctors. And last year, the new doctor wanted to biopsy it. And I was like, I don't think I want you to biopsy it. I've been going to, a doctor for years that never thought it was an issue. And by the way, the story on why I had to get a new doctor, all my fault. Basically, when I started my own business and I was looking at, ways to cut expenses, I was like, well, I just won't go get the skin check. It's not that big of a deal. It's never been a big deal. Again, I know you guys are probably gasping, but these are the things that we do, right? And so I was just like, that'll be a great way to cut cost. And then when I thought, I need to go back, apparently I was then a new patient and they weren't taking new patients. So they wanted to biopsy it. I wouldn't let them. But I did notice in July, I was randomly looking through some photos, trying to find something to probably post on Instagram. And I noticed that there was a picture where I could kind of see that mark. And I was like, wait, I think that looks different. And so I just noticed that it indeed had changed. So called the doctor, made the appointment for us to come in. And that's when they decided they definitely wanted to go ahead and biopsy it. And it took me a little bit to get in, but when I got in, and I was nervous going because, I just had this gut feeling it wasn't good, especially since it had changed. And not to mention, people were saying things about it. Even so, when I was with my law school girlfriends, when we went hiking in August, one of them said something. And then when I was at my mastermind retreat with the mastermind that I host, one of my clients said something about it. So, people were noticing it looked maybe a little bit odd too. So go in and, she basically confirmed that she thought it was bad too. She said, it follows the ABCs of melanoma. I have no idea to this day what the ABCs are, but she said it's the ABCs. So we're going to go ahead and biopsy it. And they took a decent chunk then. They cut it out basically because they wanted to get the whole thing for the biopsy, for the pathology. And she'd kind of prepared me so it's really going to most likely be, is this melanoma or is this invasive melanoma? And we were talking about what both treatments would look like. And she said, but crazier things have happened. It could come back and maybe it's just basal and maybe it's malignant and maybe it's nothing at all. But I think we need to prepare for the worst. And I was really, really upset that day. And I did not tell a single soul. As I was leaving, I was like, do I tell anybody? Should I make some phone calls? I was wanting to make some phone calls and I didn't. I thought, nope, I'm going to keep this to myself. I'll process it and figure it out on my own. That's kind of my go-to mechanism. And I'm sure I'm not alone. You guys may do that same thing, but I am very, very careful in who I tell things to. I just don't trust people. Mostly, the crazy thing is it's like, I don't trust them to, I guess, hold my secrets. And I don't trust them to just receive it and hold space for me. So, and I get that's my own stuff. But anyway, like that's just part of, I think, me also trying to be a control freak. If I can control the information, it makes me, I don't know, feel better. So I know these things about myself, and yet, awareness is only part of it. Talking to my husband that night, I said, it doesn't look good. I'm upset. I've been crying. I'm going to give myself today and then I'll be over it. And I'm not telling anybody. And he was like, well, I already mentioned something to someone at work. And I'm like, well, I didn't give you permission to do that. So I was like, I'm not telling anyone. And he was like, at what point are you going to tell people? And he was talking about my family, my best friends. And I was like, I don't know. I may not. And he was like, what do you mean you may not? I said, I may not. I want to get the results. And then based on what they are, I may or may not share. And he was like, so assuming it's the worst, assuming you've got to do chemo, you're telling me you're not going to tell anyone. I mean, at some point it's going to be obvious. And I said, well, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. I may or may not tell anyone because, I don't want people to think of me differently, look at me differently, have pity for me. Like, I know this is crazy, but this is like my biggest thing. Like, I never want people to pity me ever. And there was a concern that, depending on what it was, being, at this point, a solopreneur, whether people have it at the top of their heads or not, they may not hire me to do things if they have concerns, right? I mean, like if they think that I'm not going to be able to show up, or if they think that there might be, long-term complications. And I was like, I just don't think it's a good business move to tell people. And so that's just where I was. And I have to tell you that it took 9 days to get the results back. And those were really long days. I was super busy though. I had my other go-to mechanism is I just bury myself in work. That's a way to not feel feelings. So I had more than enough to do. We were having some logistical nightmares with the planner, which is an episode in and of itself. And I had the Get It Done challenge going on, which really requires a ton of my time in a way that I normally don't. I had all of my 4-month masterminds. I had calls with them. With my annual mastermind, I had my quarterly deep dive coaching with them, individual coaching of 2-hour slots each. So I was just completely overwhelmed with work, which helped me. But again, I'm not telling anyone anything. But I noticed I wasn't sleeping through the night. And I couldn't decide if I wasn't sleeping through the night because I was so overwhelmed with work, or if I was overwhelmed with fear and emotions that I wasn't processing. And it might be a mixture of both, but I plan enough ahead that even during busy times, I know nothing, like balls are not going to be dropped. So I suspect it was the latter. So I got my results on a Friday, which was the Get It Done challenge. We were still doing that. And the doctor called me and, she told me the news and was like, I'm really sorry. And I was like, why are you sorry? Like I thought this was good news, because the news was it's just stage 1. It's not invasive. We're not actually going to have to biopsy any lymph nodes. We're not going to have to, do anything other than surgery, which honestly was like the best case scenario. I mean, obviously the best case scenario would be there was nothing there, but I was already prepared for it. So I was like ecstatic with this news. I mean, I was really excited. I was so happy. And that's genuine. I was so happy with that news. And she was like, do you have questions? And I'm like, well, I don't think so. Why would I have questions? We're just doing surgery, right? And she was like, well, yeah. And she was like, well, I'm calling you on my cell phone. And I'm not by my phone all the time. I'm like, nor should you be. It's called boundaries. And she was laughing. She was like, no client ever talks to me like this. And she was like, but, call me tonight, this weekend. And I'm like, why would I call you? Like, I am so confused. Why would I call you? And she was like, well, some people take a diagnosis like this really seriously or really hard. And sometimes when they get the news the first time, they're kind of in shock. So, they've got more questions and, it's a really big deal. And I was like, there is no need for me to call you. And this is not a big deal. This is great news. I said, am I confused? Is this not great news? And she was like, it is great news in that we can just do surgery. Yes. She was like, but it is melanoma. And I was like, okay, fine. I was like, she's being overly dramatic about this. So I tell my husband, he was excited too, because again, we were expecting far worse. So at this point, I decide I will tell people. And of course, and you guys are, hopefully you don't judge me, but it is what it is. So what I did next was I texted people. No one got a phone call. Everyone got a text message. My brother, sister, mom, and dad, and by the way, my parents are divorced. They all got a text message at once. And I said so that no one could claim I told them last, and, texted my law school girlfriends. And then over the course of a few days, texted people that, I just really wanted them to hear it from me. And it was so interesting because the response was, the responses were kind of all over the place. I mean, obviously everybody's very loving and supportive, but some were very upset, really concerned, just really sad. And others were like, yeah, that's great that you can just do surgery. And that day, I had to push some things off. I wasn't really able to do the live on Monday for the Get It Done Challenge. I had to push off my Q4 bonus webinar. But otherwise, I was just like, everything is just normal. It's no big deal. And I'm not really going to tell anyone other than my close friends. And I even told my husband we were headed to, our dogs play this sport called flyball. We were headed to practice for that. And he was like, are you going to tell anybody? I'm like, no, why would I tell anybody? It's like no big deal. It's no big deal. And I mean, I was feeling really good. It's kind of crazy. And I was telling some of my friends, I was like, I'm actually really happy with this news. I'm like, I know that no one has had time to process it the way that I have. So maybe just dumping that news on you can be, I don't know, you've just not had time to process it. But like, I was in a great mood and I was like, no, I'm not going to tell anybody. And I told my husband, I was like, I feel like it would be wrong to really say something because it's not real. And he was like, what do you mean it's not real? And I'm like, it's not like real cancer. And he was like, as in there are some forms that are fake? And I was like, well, I mean, kind of. It's just skin cancer. It's not a big deal. And he was like, yeah, but it's the worst kind of skin cancer. And I'm like, yeah, but it's still just skin cancer. It's just melanoma. And he was like, is that what you would tell the friends and family of people who have lost loved ones to melanoma? And I'm like, well, obviously not. I would be a terrible person. But mine is different because I caught it early. It's just stage 1. It's not, a higher stage. It's not invasive. He's like, okay, so let me get this straight. If it's invasive, it's real cancer. And if it's not, it's fake cancer. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of, I think, how I see it. And he was like, well, would you tell other people that who have it? And I'm like, oh, no, not at all. But I probably wouldn't look at it the same way. And that's just me being 100% honest. I just wouldn't. I wouldn't look at it the same way because I've lost people to cancer myself. My aunt died when she was 40 of breast cancer, and that was so hard watching her go through that. And then my cousin also died of breast cancer when she was 40. And I've lost others, including that stepdad neighbor I was telling you about. And it's just so hard to see people go through that and not make it through. And so to compare what I have to that is just, in my mind, so unfair and completely inappropriate. But that's part of, that's part of my lawyer brain. That's part of my black and white thinking. And I realize that's probably not accurate, but that's kind of how I look at it. And so the first few days, that's really where I was. I was just like, this is not a big deal. And to even say anything would be dramatic because I would be, asking people for thoughts and support for something that's not a big deal at all, especially if you consider what other people go through and you compare it to their journeys and their experience. But as the days went on, I noticed that I still was not sleeping. And granted, still super busy, still dealing with a bunch of crazy stuff going on in the business, but it became clear that there was something else there. And that's what it is. It's that maybe there was some fear there that I was not allowing myself to have, some emotions that I was not allowing myself to have because I felt like it should not be a big deal compared to what others go through. So when I shared it with, my coach and said I was having a really bad week in general, it was a terrible week for many different reasons in the business and with the diagnosis. That's when she was like, you really need to share this. And I was like, I don't think so. But of course, as soon as she said you need to walk the walk and not just talk the talk, one, I'm very coachable, and two, integrity is so important to me. And it just kind of hit a nerve. And I was like, okay, well, then I have to share. Well, as soon as I shared in the email, and by the way, writing it made me so nervous and so nauseous. And I had my assistant actually schedule it to go out during a time when I was doing a podcast interview so that I couldn't even know what was happening. But of course, as soon as I got off that podcast interview, I had all kinds of text messages, phone calls from friends that I had not told. They found out through the email, and then just email responses. And I was a bit overwhelmed. My first reaction was like, no, make it go away, make it go away. I never should have said anything because I don't feel comfortable in that role of being in the spotlight when it comes to something like that. I'm totally cool with being in the spotlight if we're talking about like acting, singing, being in court, being on this podcast, being a speaker, but not in that light. Because even though I totally get that that is not a weakness, it was this perception of, and pity is not the right word, but guys, like this is just so uncomfortable for people to even say, like, I'm thinking of you, because I'm like, there are so many other people who need your thoughts more than me. But I also know that if I heard a client say that, I would be like, I'm sorry, what? So I get it, right? And this is part of why, my journey is yours is mine. We are all the same because, I can catch this stuff now. I at least see it. But that was my initial reaction. And I wanted to crawl in a hole and I regretted having said anything. But so many of you shared so many wonderful things. You shared with me your journeys of cancer, and many of you had what I call the real kind, the scary kind. Many of you shared with me that you also have had it caught early and had surgery. Lots of different people reached out on the skin cancer, whether it was basal. There's like 3 kinds. Well, there's more than that, but those are the 3 basic. And guys, I'm still researching this because I don't fully know it all, but not that you guys need the research on any of it. I'm just saying I'm not even probably sharing all of it accurately. But, for me, like it's just the research. I don't even know that I need it. But you shared these journeys with me and, you've offered so many wonderful things. Locally, people have offered to go to the doctor with me or to come over, bring me things. Some of you guys have sent me cards and sent me gifts, and it just feels really awkward to be in that place. And I am so appreciative. I'm just not good at receiving. And my guess is many of you are the same way, right? We're good at problem solving. We're good at doing for others. We're not good at receiving. But I am learning. I'm doing my best. The one thing that did make me feel bad, of course, I wouldn't say the people pleaser in me. It's probably the Southern girl in me that feels like I now need to respond to each and every person who reached out. And I'm already so overwhelmed, and I'm trying to pull back on some things to take care of my health more. And like literally, it would just add a bigger burden, and I would be up till midnight responding to all of you. And I do intend to respond, but I feel terrible. I feel terrible that I've not been able to respond, especially to those who have shared their own cancer journeys with me. So if you're listening, just know that I am so appreciative of you sharing that. I'm still processing it all. I will send you notes because I'm having conversations in my mind with you. I've just not put them down in words. So just know I'm not ignoring you, and I don't take lightly that you would share those things with me. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I just got back from my consult with the surgeon. So I told you guys I would keep you informed, and we are going to do surgery on October 22nd. It is hopefully not going to be a huge deal. It looks like they're going to take out, I think, about like a 2-inch square, which seems like a lot. But that's the margins they think that we'll need. We'll get the pathology report about a week later when they take the sutures out, and hopefully they don't have to do it again. It will be enough. So, I think my fear is it's not so much the surgery itself. When I was in a really bad car wreck when I was 3, I have this huge scar all across my abdominal. So I'm used to that. So I'm not really worried about the scarring on my arm, but I think the fear is just long-term. So again, like I said, I don't have all the research, but did a little, and you have about a 1% chance of getting melanoma, but about 10% die from it each year. And I am very young. Most people get melanoma in their 60s. So because I'm so young, and I guess given the risk factors, I will now have to go in every 3 months, I guess, for the rest of my life for them to try to catch any other places, because the likelihood of it showing up somewhere else is pretty high. And, melanoma can show up in places internally, not just on your skin. So that's a little bit harder to catch. And I think that's where my fear is. I think that's why I'm not sleeping through the night. It's, just what does this mean long term? That said, I am very aware that there is nothing I can do about it other than take care of myself. And that means I do need to up my self-care. Obviously, I already take care of myself in the sun. We'll do even more of that. But just the stress and the overworking and being, pulled in a lot of directions, that's not good. It's not healthy. So seeing things through a different lens, I'm going to be pulling back in some areas. So we probably won't be offering as much in 2019. And we were already looking at this. I tell everybody to focus. And I was purposefully focusing on like one thing at a time. And I was in what I would call maintenance mode, but I'm fully tapped out even at maintenance mode. So I can't really grow or scale any of the things that I had built. So unless I bring in investors, which I don't really want to do, I don't think at this point, I have to really double down on just a few things and pull back on a few others. Not meaning they're coming off the table forever, but with this diagnosis, it's obvious that I'm going to have to be even more focused than before, because I need to really carve out time for my physical and emotional well-being. I've told you guys a million times, flow is not my go-to. That is not natural for me. I have to focus on it. And I've been so focused on the business this year that, flow has taken a backseat even more. And so that's got to come back. I have to make it a priority for 2019. So I'll keep you updated on what that looks like and what we are focusing on. I will tell you, I think it's going to be doubling down on our masterminds and the life and law planner system and letting everything else just kind of be in the background. But we'll see. I will let you know what that looks like. But anyway, that's kind of where we are. That's where I am. We're going to have the surgery. It's going to hopefully remove everything. We'll have good margins. And hopefully, it doesn't come back. And hopefully I can start sleeping again at night. But, in the Life and Law Blueprint, and if you guys have never read that ebook, it is free on my website. Just go to heatherjoyhubbard.com. You can read it. You guys know that one of the steps is surrendering to the things that you don't have control over. And this is one I don't have control over. So the practice for me at this point is really surrendering. And, the very first coach I had, she likes to say, when you think you've surrendered, surrender some more. So that is one where that's going to be my focus. And I suspect that many of you have things going on in your life as well. It may not be a health issue. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's a different kind of health issue. But you may be in a position where it's really time to surrender as well, which can be really hard for us control freak, problem solving, right brain or left brain type A lawyers. So feel free to join me in this journey of surrendering, because I know that focusing on, ruminating on, giving power to things you don't have control over takes you out. And one thing I know, I've had many run-ins with death. I don't know that I've talked about that much on the podcast before. I've had my own near-death experiences more than once, and I've had many people close to me die, many in very bizarre accidents. So, I already have this fear of an early death. So what that means is I often feel pressure to be living my best life, to be fulfilling my purpose. And I think that's why I get so focused. It's why I have my planning system, because I don't know how much time I have here. Hopefully I live until I'm, 110, but I really don't ever want to take a single day for granted. I really don't want to give away my time to other people. It's why it kills me to see so many attorneys living lives for others and giving their time away each and every day to people and things that don't really matter at the end of the day, or things that fill them up. I am 100% focused on fulfilling my purpose and making sure that I have a huge impact. And so this is simply bringing that home again. I sometimes get nauseous, and I know what that is because I've gone through it before. It was part of starting my business. There's that knot in my stomach of, are you spending your time in the best way to have the biggest impact? And by the way, not everyone feels that. That is definitely, I'm a purpose-driven person. So it's just all bringing that home to me. And so I'm going to get even more focused than I have been. So what that probably means is I'm going to be even more successful, because I know what focus can do for you, but it's also going to help me make myself and self-care more of a priority as well. So this has been a super long episode. Once I got started, it wasn't so bad. But yes, thank you so much for giving me support and space, even when it feels uncomfortable to me. Thank you for embracing my vulnerability. To my knowledge, no one has been mean or judged me, but Justin's my bodyguard. He probably wouldn't have let me know if any of you were. But I'm good. I'm a little bit nervous. I'm a little bit scared, but I am good. And I cannot wait to see what's next. I can't wait to see so many of you in November in Phoenix for Life and Law Live. And, I will keep you updated, and I appreciate you letting me share my journey with you. So have a great week, and we'll talk again soon. For show notes, downloads, and other free resources, and to keep the conversation going, head on over to hustleandflowpodcast.com. See you there.